Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you, Bill. Thank you both for your incredible, principled, conservative leadership. Thank you for fighting for the Constitution every day. And thank you for leading our team here in the great state of New Hampshire. God bless the great state of New Hampshire. Monday night, we had an amazing victory night. Can we turn the mic on there? Right now, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I do not like grenades in hand. I do not like things in my hand. All right, is that better? Can people hear with that?
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, Monday night, we had a pretty remarkable victory night.
You sure did.
You know, for everyone watching the TV news the night before, the pundits said over and over again, we couldn't win. Every pundit on every TV station said Cruz would lose. Every pundit said Trump was going to win, Trump was going to win, Trump was going to win. I remember I was watching Hannity. He had 6 experts. The 6 experts' predictions, Trump, 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 Trump. But then Monday night, the people of the great state of Iowa had something different to say about it. We saw an incredible victory for the grassroots. An incredible victory for courageous conservatives rising up. What the people of Iowa did is they put the country on notice. The media is not going to pick the Republican nominee or the next president of the United States. The pundits aren't going to pick the next president. The lobbyists aren't going to pick the next president. The Washington establishment isn't going to pick the next president. But rather, we, the people, will select the next president. And what was so encouraging is we saw the old Reagan coalition coming back together. We saw conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians and Reagan Democrats all coming together and standing in a record turnout. The people of Iowa said, we want a proven, consistent conservative. We want someone who's walked the walk. We want someone who we know and trust will stand and defend the Constitution of the United States. You know, polling shows that more than half of Americans believe that our kids will have worse lives than we do. 65%. I am convinced that the central issue of 2016 of this election is reigniting the promise of America. Getting back to that central ideal that our kids will have a better life than we did, and their kids will have a better life than they did. The first time in history, in over 2 centuries of our nation's history, it has never been the case that people thought their kids would have a worse life than they did until right now. That is how profoundly off track we are. So how do we turn it around? How do we reignite the promise of America? It's real simple. We get back to the principles that built America and made America great in the first place. Nice thing about eternal truths, they're always true. Number 1, we bring back jobs and growth and opportunity. My number 1 priority in the Senate, my number 1 priority as president is economic growth. Why? Because growth is foundational to everything else. You want to turn around unemployment. You want to pay down the debt. You want to rebuild and strengthen the military. You want to strengthen and preserve Social Security and Medicare. You got to have growth. With growth, we can do all of that. Without growth, we can't do any of it. And the people here, we understand cause and effect. We understand that every time we go down the road we're going down right now, the result is misery and stagnation and malaise. That's what happens with out-of-control spending and taxing and regulation. That's where it goes. And by the way, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, their solution is double down on more of the same. We need yet more taxes, more spending, more regulation, and you know what? We'll get even more of the misery and stagnation and malaise. It doesn't work. But we also understand the flip side, that every time the federal government pursues tax reform and regulatory reform, every time we take the boot of the federal government off of the back of the necks of small businesses, we see incredible economic growth. Small businesses are the heart of our economy. 2/3 of all new jobs come from small businesses. You want to hammer job growth, hammer small businesses like we've seen for 7 years. On the flip side, if you want to see incredible job growth, unleash small businesses. Make it easier for small businesses to grow and create jobs. Regulatory reform, the most important regulatory reform, is we need to repeal every word of Obamacare.
Yes.
Obamacare is the biggest job killer in this country. Millions of Americans have lost their jobs, have been forced into part-time work, have lost their health care, their doctors, have seen their premiums skyrocket. Here in New Hampshire, premiums have gone through the roof because of Obamacare. If I'm elected president, we will repeal every word of it, and we will pass common sense health care reform that makes health insurance personal and portable and affordable and keeps government from getting in between us and our doctors. And then tax reform. The simplest and best tax reform is we should adopt a simple flat tax where every American can fill out our taxes on a postcard.
Absolutely.
And when we do that, we should abolish the IRS. The second key to reigniting the promise of America is we need to defend our constitutional rights. All of them, instead of the federal government violating the Bill of Rights. The Constitution and Bill of Rights are not a rough draft. They're not suggestions. We need a president who defends the First Amendment, who defends free speech, and especially religious liberty. You want to understand just how off track we are, you need look no further than the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Yes.
Little Sisters of the Poor are a Catholic charity of nuns who've taken vows of poverty. They spend their lives caring for the poor and the elderly. Right now today, the Obama administration is litigating against the Little Sisters, trying to impose millions of dollars of fines on them in order to force the nuns to pay for abortion-inducing drugs and others. Now let me give you all a real simple rule of thumb. If you're litigating against nuns, you've probably done something wrong. If I'm elected president on the very first day in office, I will instruct the Department of Justice and the IRS and every other federal agency that the persecution of religious liberty ends today. We need to defend the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms.
Yes.
And let me tell you, the Second Amendment, it's not about hunting. It's not about skeet shooting or target shooting. Those are fun, but But that's not why the Second Amendment is in the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment is in the Bill of Rights because if anyone comes into your home at night and seeks to harm your family and seeks to harm your children, then every one of us has a right to defend our home and defend our family and to defend our children. Just a couple of weeks ago, President Obama issued yet more illegal executive actions trying to undermine the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. If I'm elected president on the very first day in office, the first thing I will do is rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action taken. We need to defend the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, our rights to privacy. How many of y'all have your cell phones? Let me ask you to please leave your cell phones on. I want to make sure President Obama hears every word we say. We need to defend the 10th Amendment. Or as President Obama calls it, the what? The fundamental protection that says the powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states. Yes. That means there's certain responsibilities the federal government needs to do and do first. It needs to protect this nation, to keep us safe, to rebuild the military, to stand by our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines. And we need to secure the borders and end sanctuary cities. But there are other areas that the federal government has no business sticking its nose. And chief among those is education, and we need to repeal every word of Common Core. The third key to reigniting the promise of America is we need to restore America's leadership in the world. For 7 years, America has receded from leadership in the world. We have abandoned our friends and allies. And we have shown weakness and appeasement to our enemies. Instead of a president who boycotts Prime Minister Netanyahu, imagine America standing unapologetically alongside the nation. We will have a commander-in-chief who stands up and says to the world, we will defeat radical Islamic terror. We'll have a president willing to utter the words radical Islamic terror. And we will not weaken, we will not degrade. We will utterly and completely destroy ISIS. Now, some of y'all may be thinking, can this happen? Can we do it? You know, Scripture tells us there's nothing new under the sun. I think where we are today is very, very much like the late 1970s, like the Jimmy Carter administration. Same failed economic policy. Same feckless and naive foreign policy. In fact, the very same countries, Russia and Iran, openly laughing at and mocking the President of the United States. You know, the one person in America thrilled with the job Barack Obama's doing? Jimmy Carter. Well, and I got to tell you, by the way, some news broke today that Jimmy Carter has endorsed Donald Trump. Wow. I'm not making this up. This This news broke today that Jimmy Carter gave a public speech, and he said, as between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, I prefer Donald Trump. And Jimmy Carter said why. He said because Donald Trump is malleable. He won't stand for anything in Washington. Donald Trump will be fine. That Cruz guy actually believes this stuff. And you know, in response, I may have to send Jimmy Carter a bouquet of roses.
Yeah.
But why is it that that analogy to the late 1970s gives me so much hope and optimism? Because we remember how that story ended. All across this country, millions of men and women rose up and became the Reagan. And it didn't come from Washington. Washington despised Ronald Reagan. It came from the American people, and I'll tell you, 36 years ago, that former governor of California came to the state of New Hampshire. The media despised him. Washington despised him. The pundits all said he couldn't win. He was too conservative. Everyone knows the state of New Hampshire is never going to vote for a conservative. But the Granite State shocked the media and shocked the world, and because of the leadership of the men and women in this room, gave us our 40th President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan. You want to talk about the impact New Hampshire can have? That decision, that victory in New Hampshire, literally changed the course of history, liberated billions across the globe, won the Cold War, and tore the Berlin Wall to the ground. We're at a similar moment, a similar inflection point where the stakes are just as great. Why is it that I'm so optimistic? Because the same thing is happening again. All across this country, people are waking up. Millions of people are waking up. It took Jimmy Carter to give us Ronald Reagan. And I am convinced the most long-lasting legacy of Barack Obama is going to be a new generation of leaders in the Republican Party who stand for freedom, who stand for the Constitution, and who stand for the Judeo-Christian values that have built this great nation. And with that, I'm happy to answer or dodge any questions. Yes, sir.
When you're president,
I like how the question begins.
we just had a president, we have a president that appears to never work with Capitol Hill. Would you commit to a couple times a month being over on the Hill, working with them?
So it's a great question. The question is, we have a president now who never works with Congress. Would I commit to work closely with Congress, to go over to Capitol Hill, to meet with them? Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Listen, you look at President Obama, it is astonishing the imperiousness of it. He doesn't speak to members of Congress. He doesn't speak to Republicans, but heck, he doesn't talk to Democrats. You want to get Democratic senators to put 2 drinks in and get them talking about this president.
That's right.
Because he doesn't speak to them. He blows them off. This is an imperial presidency.
Yeah.
In fact, Jonathan Turley, who is a liberal law professor, voted for Barack Obama in 2008. He said Barack Obama has become the embodiment of the imperial presidency. Barack Obama has become the president Richard Nixon always wished he could be. Now, there is a silver lining to that. Barack Obama has abused his power through executive authority. Everything done with executive authority can be undone with executive authority.
That's right.
But when it comes to changing the direction of the country and the ship of state, a president has 3 levers. Number one, you've got executive power, which is why on day one I will rescind every illegal executive order. It's why also you can end the persecution of religious liberty, you can end Common Core, because both of those are being used through the abuse of executive power, so you can do that on day one. The second avenue, the lever that a president can use to change the direction, is foreign policy. It's why I have pledged on my first day in office to rip to shreds this catastrophic Iranian nuclear deal. And to begin the process of moving the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, the once and eternal capital of Israel. Now, both of those a president can do without Congress. The third avenue, though, is legislation. Legislation's hard, particularly because Congress and Washington are broken. You look at what Reagan did in 1980. He took the case to the American people, and when the Reagan Revolution swept in, it changed the dynamics in Washington. It changed the incentives so that Congress had to listen to the American people. You know, there's an old joke that politics is Hollywood for ugly people. My wife says I resemble everyone. But what Reagan understood is you go over the heads of Congress, you get the American people behind you, and that's how you get Congress to move. And it is absolutely my intention to work with Congress, to work with Republicans and Democrats, but to do so from a position of strength. So to deal with civility. So, for example, if you look at this presidential race, when others have attacked and insulted me, and I can think of one who does so on Twitter on a daily basis, I have not responded in kind. I will treat everyone with respect and civility, but the way you move Congress is you go to the American people, you get the American people behind you. So, for example, as president, I intend to send to Congress. If you send me a bill that is full of pork, if you send me a budget full of corporate welfare and cronyism, if you send me a bill with special carve-outs for Congress, I will veto it. What are the three things I'll do first to help us? Well, there are 5 things that I said I would do on the first day. The first one is rescind all of the executive orders that are illegal. President Obama has issued orders, but they're contrary to law and contrary to the Constitution, so I will sign new orders repealing those orders that Obama's done. The second thing that I said I'd do on the first day is I'm going to direct the U.S. Department of Justice to open an investigation into Planned Parenthood and to prosecute any...
Thank you.
The third thing I mentioned as well is I'm going to instruct every federal agency to stop persecuting religious liberty. The fourth thing is rip to shreds this agreement with Iran that allows them to acquire nuclear weapons. And the fifth thing is begin to move the American embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. All of that is on day one. I gotta say, she's a lot cuter girl.
Would you be in favor of sunset laws? Basically, I'd much rather have Congress worried about what laws we're going to keep than making new laws. Second is basically the corruption that's in Washington. Do you favor term limits? And I go beyond that, basically putting in people's blind trust for anybody in the Senate and a prohibition, just like somebody who belongs to the customers, the sweepstakes thing, they would not be allowed to become a lobbyist or to benefit, not them, not their families. And the third one is basically, I know I want a lot. Andrew Jackson is the only president who's not only balanced the budget, but retired the debt. It's only happened once. I would like you to be the president that repeats that. I'm looking at the young people here. I have children as well. I'm worried about their future. What are you going to do to get the control of the debt and get spending in a more reasonable thing? Those are my questions.
All right, 3 very good questions. Could I maybe, by the way, grab some water from behind? 3 very good questions. Let's take them one at a time. The first one was, am I in favor of sunsetting legislation, regulatory programs, agencies? The answer is absolutely yes. Sunsetting is one of the great methods you see, for example, a lot of state legislatures use. Thank you. A lot of state legislatures use. In Texas, we have a sunset commission, and each agency periodically sunsets and has to go back to the legislature and justify its existence, get new authorization, and it ends up being a powerful vehicle for limiting waste and government waste. I think that is very worth doing. The second question was term limits. And I strongly support term limits, not only for members of Congress, but also for Supreme Court justices. I used to support term limits until I actually got to the Senate, and when you see it firsthand, I promise you, as bad as you think it is, it's worse. The third question was, what are we going to do about the debt and balancing the budget? There are really two things that matter for the debt and balancing the budget. The first is economic growth. It's why my focus is so laser-like on economic growth. Because if you look at the federal budget, it's the only first-order variable. It's the only input that has a dramatic impact on everything else. And the reason is, look, when you have booming growth, it becomes a double whammy. When you have booming growth, millions of people are coming off of unemployment, are coming off of food stamps, are coming off of disability. So government expenditures start going down. But all those people go get jobs, they begin paying taxes, paying into the systems, and revenues go up. So it's a double whammy, which is why growth is so powerful for the federal budget. How do you get growth? We talked about before. The two levers for getting growth are tax reform and regulatory reform. Historically, the economy's grown on average 3.3% a year. That's been since World War II. From 2008 to today, our economy has grown 1.2%. If we stay mired in the Obama-Clinton stagnation of 1 and 2% growth, we can't balance the budget. The math is impossible. Now, if you get to historical levels of growth, 3, 4, 5%, everything turns around. The last 4-year period where growth averaged less than 1% was 1978 to 1982. It was coming out of the Jimmy Carter administration. And what did Reagan do? He came in and he passed tax reform and regulatory reform. The economy took off. Anyone know what economic growth was in '84, the 4th year of Reagan's presidency? 7.2%. Millions lifted out of poverty into prosperity. That's the single biggest thing you can do to turn the debt around. The other thing that matters is you've got to be willing to take on the corruption of Washington. You know, I've said many times the biggest divide we've got politically, it's not between Democrats and Republicans. It's between career politicians in Washington, in both parties, and the American people. And you know, every candidate running on the Republican side says they'll stand up to Washington. The natural follow-up question all of us need to ask is, okay, when have you ever stood up to Washington? When have you taken on, not just Democrats, but leaders of your own party? Because, you know, when you do that, you get slammed by Democrats. You get slammed by the media, and you get slammed by Republicans. And I'll give you an example of it from just this week. The Iowa caucus. Now, the Iowa caucus, our campaign did something that has not happened before, which is I came out publicly and clearly against the ethanol mandate, and we still won overwhelmingly in the state of Iowa. Now, what's interesting about that is the second and third place finishers, Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, both attacked me for opposing the ethanol mandate. They both went hard to Iowa farmers and said, we'll preserve the cronyism, we'll keep the corporate welfare going. Donald Trump went even further. He said, I'll expand the ethanol mandate. All you can eat. So you had the second and third spending millions. The sitting governor of Iowa attacked me directly, told the people of Iowa, vote for anybody but Ted.
Yeah.
You know what? If we're going to stop bankrupting our kids and grandkids, you've got to have someone willing to say, no cronyism, no corporate welfare, no bailouts for anybody. It's going to be a fair and level playing field, and we're going to stand for the taxpayer. My special interest is our children, is our future, is sticking to the Constitution, is not mortgaging the next generation. And so when it comes to turning around the debt and deficit, when you've got it, you look at the other folks in this field who are good, honorable people. I like the other people running. But you should ask, if they say they're going to take on Washington, when have they ever done so? Because I promise you, in all of recorded history, no one has ever grown a backbone after they got to 1600 Pennsylvania. And you know, let me say something about the good men and women of Iowa. For me to come in and say we should end this mandate, now we should do it fairly, there should be no mandates for everyone, it should be a level playing field, but the men and women of Iowa made a decision. We care more about the future of our kids and grandkids. We care more about our country. That's the kind of sacrifice we need to have, focused on what matters. If we stand together, we can pull this country back. Final question. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Joey, for opening your doors to this event. I really appreciate it. Sir, my question to you is concerning the military. My name is Jim Boyer from Merrimack. I'm retired Air Force. I absolutely support you 110% on the build-up of our military. But what do you propose to do with the people that get out of the military?
Right.
The government currently today are turning their back on all of us.
Yes.
And it's very disheartening as a retiree.
Yep.
And I'd like to know what you intend to do to correct that problem.
Right. Well, sir, thank you very much. Let me first of all say thank you for serving this country. Thank you for standing up. The question is incredibly important. Let me take it in two parts. Let me focus first on active duty servicemen and women, and then focus second on veterans. With respect to the active duty, we have seen the ability to defend this nation, our readiness, degraded tremendously over the last 7 years. Let me give some specifics. In 1991, the beginning of Desert Storm, we had roughly 8,000 planes. Today we have about 4,000. In 1991, we had 529 ships. Today we have 272. Our Army had roughly a third more soldiers in it in 1991 than it has today. And as you know, morale of our troops has never been low. They have a commander-in-chief who does not believe in their mission, and who, even worse, sends them into combat with rules of engagement with their arms tied behind their backs, and they cannot defend themselves. I think that is fundamentally wrong and immoral. If and when we have to engage in military action, we've always been reluctant to do so, but if and when we are called to defend this nation, we should go in, use overwhelming force, kill the enemy, and then get the heck out. Your second question concerned our veterans.
What do you propose to do to medically take care of us once we either retire or get out of the military?
Well, the current operation of the VA is a disgrace. You know, Hillary Clinton not too long ago said, "What's the big deal?"